It's ours anyways. Oh no, absolutely. Thanks, Jeff. sorry. So I'm going to get like a 5-minute warning. So. Oh shit! Yeah, well, it's going around you now. Oh, it's already told me.
Paycheck Leisure's time for a change. We need access to quality, affordable patio karaoke in this town. So we found the sleepers with the chance to patio karaoke. You know what?
You're starting off.
But you haven't seen it.
I want to begin by saying a few words directly to racialized Canadians who face discrimination every single day in their lives, even in a country like Canada. What I did hurt them, hurt people who shouldn't have to face intolerance and discrimination because of their identity. This is something that I deeply, deeply regret. Darkening your face, regardless of the context or the circumstances, is always unacceptable because of the racist history of blackface. I should have understood that then, and I never should have done it. Je veux d'abord dire directement aux Canadiens qui font face à de l'intolérance à tous les jours à cause de leur identité que c'est pas acceptable que dans un pays comme le nôtre, des gens soient encore victimes de racisme. Et le geste que j'ai posé, les gestes que j'ai posés ont blessé profondément ces gens-là qui doivent vivre à tous les jours avec de l'intolérance. À cause de l'historique raciste de ce geste, ce n'est jamais acceptable de foncer sa peau. J'aurais dû comprendre ça à l'époque et je n'aurais jamais dû le faire. Je m'en excuse profondément.
Mr. Trudeau, hi, David Cochran with CBC News. Last night on the plane, when we asked you if the picture that emerged in the Time report was the only time you had done this, you left us with the impression there was only one other incident. And since then, Global News has released a video which seems to show that there was at least a third incident. So exactly how many times have you darkened your skin with makeup in an act that you have yourself described as racist?
I shared the moments that I recollected, but I recognize that it is something absolutely unacceptable to do. And I appreciate calling it makeup, but it was blackface. And that is just not right. It is something that people who live with the kind of discrimination that far too many people do because of the color of their skin, or their history, or their origins, or their language, or their religion, face on a regular basis. And I didn't see that from the layers of privilege that I have. And for that I am deeply sorry, and I apologize. Okay. Je reconnais que c'était inacceptable. J'ai partagé les événements dont je me souvenais, mais la réalité c'est que ce serait jamais acceptable de foncer sa peau quand il y a des personnes qui vivent à tous les jours avec la discrimination à cause de leur identité. C'est pas la personne que je suis, j'aurais dû le savoir à ce moment-là, et je le regrette profondément.
So, Mr. Trudeau, how many times? Is it just the three that we know about, or are there more incidents? Because you know people are looking for them. And if a candidate were to come forward now with this in their history, would you allow them to run for the Liberals in this election?
I think that's a question that we would look at every step of the way. I think examining the case-by-case situation, examining the actions that someone has taken. I am certainly conscious that in my political career as leader and indeed as Prime Minister, We've taken many concrete actions to fight against racism, to fight against intolerance, to fight against anti-black racism specifically, to recognize unconscious bias and systemic discrimination that exists in Canada and elsewhere, to work to overcome and recognize intersectionalities that people live with in a way that so many of us simply cannot understand or appreciate the microaggressions and the challenges being faced. So even though we've moved forward in significant ways as a government, what I did, the choices I made, hurt people who thought I was an ally. I am an ally, but this is something that obviously I deeply regret and I never should have done.
More than
Next
three
question.
times? More
Next
than three
question.
times, yes or
Next
no,
question.
sir? More than three times, yes
Next
or no?
question.
Larry Cush, Winnipeg Free Press. Mr. Trudeau, yesterday you said that you didn't realize in 2001 that it was wrong to put on brownface, but now you do realize it is wrong, and I'm wondering when it dawned on you that it is wrong.
I think it's difficult to become a politician where you spend as much time as you do working hard to represent people, working hard to getting to know a community like the community I have the honor of representing, Papineau, where there is extraordinary diversity, extraordinary challenges, and yes, extraordinary intolerance, even in a city like Montreal, in a country like Canada, that people live with every day. And as I've learned to not just represent people, but to fight for them, and to try and build a better community and a better society, I've learned every day that it is unacceptable to engage in this sort of behavior. Okay. Quand on a l'honneur d'apprendre à représenter une communauté comme le comté de Papineau à Montréal, une communauté multiculturelle, multiethnique, remplie de personnes avec une diversité extraordinaire, mais des gens qui font face à la discrimination à quasiment tous les jours dans leur vie. Cette responsabilité de bien les représenter et surtout de les défendre et de travailler pour bâtir un monde meilleur m'a enseigné, j'ai appris directement des gens de Papineau à quel point j'ai toujours bénéficié de privilèges qui voulaient dire que je ne comprenais pas la réalité de gens qui font face à ces discriminations quasiment à tous les jours. Pour ça, je suis profondément désolé et je sais que nous devons tous faire mieux en tant que pays, mais moi particulièrement, en tant que Premier ministre, je dois faire mieux.
Ran in Papineau in 2008, and later when you ran for the leadership in 2015, presumably there was a vetting process. I'm wondering if you thought enough about this issue that you volunteered that to in the vetting process, or did you ever declare that this had happened?
I never talked about this. Quite frankly, I was embarrassed. It was not something that represents the person I've become, the leader I try to be, and it was really embarrassing. J'en ai jamais parlé publiquement parce que je suis profondément gêné de ce comportement. Ça ne représente pas la personne que je suis, la personne et le politicien que je suis devenu. J'aurais dû mieux savoir, mais j'en prends la responsabilité.
Good afternoon, Mr. Trudeau. Teresa Wright from the Canadian Press. You said just a few minutes ago that you told us last night on the plane that of all of the different instances that you recalled, have you since been made aware or remembered of other instances, and if so, how many?
I think it is obvious that this is something that was deeply regrettable. I am wary of being definitive about this because the recent pictures that came out, I had not remembered. And I think the question is, how can you not remember that? The fact is, I didn't understand how hurtful this is to people who live with discrimination every single day. I have always acknowledged that I come from a place of privilege, but I now need to acknowledge that that comes with a massive blind spot. I have dedicated my leadership and my service to Canada to try and counter intolerance and racism everywhere I can, but this has been a personally a moment where I've had to reflect on the fact that wanting to do good and wanting to do better simply isn't good enough, and you need to take responsibility for mistakes that hurt people who thought I was an ally, who hopefully many of them still consider me an ally, even though this was a terrible mistake. La réalité, c'est que je ne pouvais pas être définitif parce que je ne me souvenais pas des photos récentes qui étaient sorties, qui étaient prises pendant que j'étais guide de rivière un été dans les débuts des années 90. C'est quelque chose qui me gêne profondément, que je puisse ne pas me souvenir de toutes les occasions possibles, parce que pour moi, c'est profondément frustrant pour moi de devoir reconnaître que je n'ai pas toujours été à la hauteur que je m'attends de moi-même. J'ai passé ma vie politique à essayer de défendre les droits des gens, de repousser contre l'intolérance et la discrimination, mais je dois reconnaître que j'étais aveugle à moi-même la douleur que j'ai pu causer en ces moments-là et que je cause maintenant à des gens qui comptent sur moi pour les défendre et non les faire sentir mal.
I just would like you to answer a very basic question. You've done this obviously more than 2 times. Why?
I think when we recognize, when we reflect on mistakes we made in the past, that's a question that we're always going to be asking. Why did we do that? Why did we think it was okay? Why did we think it was a good idea at the time? It wasn't a good idea. It was a terrible idea. It was something that minimizes and takes advantage of a reality that I have not had to live with, of being discriminated against, of being marginalized, of being judged for the color of my skin, for my language, my background. I come from a place of privilege, and I have endeavored in my life to put the advantages and the opportunities I've been given to serve this country, to fight for people's rights. And I have to recognize that I let a lot of people down with that choice. And I stand here today to reflect on that and to ask for forgiveness. Okay. Je pense que c'est toujours la question qu'on se... C'est toujours la question qu'on doit se poser quand on fait une erreur. Pourquoi est-ce qu'on l'a fait? Pourquoi est-ce qu'on pensait que c'était une chose qu'on pouvait ou devait faire? En réalité, que ça ne l'était pas, mais je ne comprenais pas en ce moment-là le privilège que j'avais de ne pas avoir été discriminé pour mon identité, la couleur de ma peau, ma religion, que j'ai pas eu à vivre avec l'intolérance que bien trop de gens, même dans un pays ouvert et respectueux comme le Canada, doivent vivre. C'est une réflexion que, évidemment, j'ai eue depuis, et je fais tout ce que je peux avec les opportunités que j'ai reçues dans la vie de servir et de bâtir une société meilleure. Mais la réalité, c'est que j'ai blessé des gens que j'étais censé défendre et aider. Et j'en suis profondément désolé.
M. Trudeau, Philippe Vincent Foisy de Radio-Canada. Ce matin, vous avez parlé à vos députés, vous avez parlé des membres de votre personnel, à des leaders de la communauté. Qu'est-ce que vous leur avez dit? Qu'est-ce qu'ils vous ont répondu?
J'ai parlé des choses que je suis en train de dire aujourd'hui. À quel point c'était une erreur, que c'était une chose que je n'aurais jamais dû faire et que je sais que j'ai des collègues, des députés, des candidats, des amis, des alliés, des leaders communautaires qui m'appuient, qui font partie de cette aventure politique où on essaye de bâtir un monde meilleur, qui croient profondément en ce qu'on est en train de faire, que j'ai blessé directement. Des gens qui croyaient en moi, qui croient en moi encore, mais qui doivent vivre avec le fait que je leur ai fait mal par des choix insensés il y a des années. Et je leur ai dit que, évidemment, que je m'en excuse profondément, mais que nous allons continuer de travailler à tous les jours pour rendre le Canada meilleur et pour gagner la confiance des Canadiens, de pouvoir continuer à bâtir un pays meilleur à tous les jours.
Il y a des gens de l'autre côté de la médaille qui nous ont écrit, qui écrivent sur les médias sociaux pour dire c'est une tempête dans un verre d'eau, c'est pas vraiment grave. Pouvez-vous peut-être expliquer pourquoi c'est grave et pourquoi c'est si grave au point que vous avez besoin de vous excuser?
Il y a des gens qui, comme moi dans le passé, ont jamais à comprendre, ou certainement pas vivre, le genre de discrimination que trop de gens vivent à tous les jours. Que ce soit des gens de minorités visibles, que ce soit la communauté LGBT, que ce soit des femmes, que ce soit les peuples autochtones. Il y a encore énormément de discrimination et d'intolérance dans notre société qui paraît par des micro-actions, par des gestes posés de façon délibérée, que beaucoup de gens ont la chance de ne pas voir. Et les Canadiens, et tout le monde, doit comprendre que de poser un geste comme de foncer sa peau, ça banalise et ça prend avantage et ça profite d'une réalité à laquelle beaucoup de gens ne peuvent pas s'échapper, auxquels les gens font face à tous les jours. Je pense que c'est un moment, certainement, quelque chose que moi j'ai appris au courant des dernières années, de vouloir bien représenter et servir des gens divers. C'est une réflexion que bien des gens doivent avoir.
Glenn McGregor, CTV News. Mr. Trudeau, there's a bit of confusion about the timeline of all of this. And I'm just wondering when you first told your campaign staff that there are these images of you out there that could be embarrassing if they were to come out in an election campaign. Did you know about this in 2015? Did you know about this before then? When did you tell those people that?
As I said, I was embarrassed, particularly given the person that I've become and the leader I try to be, that fights for people's rights and defends people against intolerance and racism. And I didn't want to talk about it with anyone because I'm not that person anymore. I'm someone who understands the deep hurt caused by actions like that to people who live with discrimination every single day. When we found out that Time magazine was looking for a picture of that event, I told my staff. But ultimately, the call is mine on when to talk to people, when to act on things, and the buck stops with me and I take responsibility.
You had a privileged upbringing. You went to good schools. Your father was Prime Minister and an internationalist. And I'm wondering if he knew that you were doing this in high school, appearing in blackface, and what he thought about it, and if he didn't know, what do you think he would have thought about it?
My father raised me to try and defend people's rights. One of our family mottos has always been provide counterweights. It was the reason he gave for why he chose to go to Ottawa in 1965, when all the power tended to accrue towards Quebec City in the Quiet Revolution and Quebecers becoming strong and staying in Quebec. He said, no, we need to provide counterweights. And if you're strong, you need to go where your strength is most needed. That is the way he raised me. And I certainly have tried to use the privilege that you talk about, the opportunities that I've had in my life, to put them in service of people who didn't have the kinds of opportunities that I have. That's the kind of leader, the kind of prime minister I've tried to be, the kind of man I've tried to be, certainly the kind of parent I've tried to be. And in my conversations with my kids, a difficult conversation I had this morning about taking responsibility for your actions and learning from your mistakes. This is certainly something I think my father wouldn't be pleased with how I behaved, but perhaps would feel that taking responsibility for things is important. When I think of the conversations I had with my kids this morning, I also recognize that there are far too many Canadians who this morning had to explain to their kids what those pictures were of their Prime Minister, and what kind of society we live in and what kind of world we need to live in and how things have evolved. But at the same time, I regret deeply parents who had to have difficult conversations with their kids that were uncomfortable and hurtful because of my actions.
Michelle Zilio with the Globe and Mail. In 2001, students were being expelled for wearing blackface and brownface from schools. There was also a Spike Lee movie about it in 2001. When did you realize that blackface was racist?
I think, as I've said, the privilege of representing the community of Papineau, a extraordinarily multicultural community where any given crowd looks a lot like this crowd here in Winnipeg, of people of every different background, of every different origin, and the responsibility of not just sticking up for people of all different backgrounds, but fighting for them and defending them is something that made it very, very clear to me that minimizing or further marginalizing people by dressing up that way is absolutely unacceptable.
And as a follow-up, international media, including the BBC, New York Times, and Al Jazeera, have published stories about this. Are you concerned that your behavior, including, not talking about this for 18 years publicly, has damaged Canada's reputation? And if so, what will you do about it?
I think we all need to recognize that even in an incredible country like Canada, there's still a lot of more work to do. People are still facing discrimination and marginalization every single day. Anti-black racism, unconscious bias, systemic discrimination, they still exist. Systemic discrimination still exists in our schools, in our universities, in our workplaces, in our communities. Racialized Canadians every day face extra barriers, extra comments, disparaging remarks that they have learned to live with as the reality of their day-to-day lives. And we must all, in Canada and everywhere around the world, pledge ourselves to make sure we are fighting to make it better. But there's lots of things we can and must do. That includes recognizing terrible mistakes of the past. That's what I am doing. That's what I have tried to do as Prime Minister in many occasions. And that's why we're going to continue to recognize that still Indigenous peoples in this country face unacceptable living situations, fewer opportunities. These people who were promised shared partnership and stewardship of the land and respect were treated with everything but for centuries. And we are beginning on the road of reconciliation now, but there is still a long way to go. Canadians who come from different parts of the world, whether they're first generation or fifth generation, continue to face intolerance and marginalization. We have much more to do, and I am not afraid of standing up in front of the world and saying, you know, Canada's a pretty great country, Canada's the best country in the world, but we have a lot more work to do, all of us. And that is something that I will continue to pledge every single day I have to doing.
Brittany Hobson, APTN National News. I'm going to switch gears a little bit. Earlier this week, child advocates from across the country came together to say that the federal government is not doing enough to address youth suicides. If the Liberals are re-elected, will you implement a national suicide strategy prevention plan? And if so, when would you implement that and what would it look like?
We've made significant moves forward on this terrible tragedy. There are far too many communities across the country where children are taking their lives, where suicidal ideation, where lack of opportunities, societal and intergenerational inequities have led to unacceptable rates of youth suicides and tremendous tragedies for families, for communities. We need to do a better job of addressing. And yes, we continue to move forward on things like national strategies to prevent youth suicide, but it takes more than just strategies. It takes concrete investments, which is why we've made investments in mental health service workers, in a hotline to help out for Indigenous communities, in investments in education and in new schools and in new health centers, and investments in Indigenous languages and culture, recognizing that someone who is proud of their identity and their language and can use their language is far less likely to fall victim to suicidal ideation and suicides. But the problem continues. We need to do much, much more, and we will continue to do much, much more if we get that opportunity.
Also this week, a new report was released in Manitoba showing that First Nations people are dying at younger rates than non-Indigenous people. But we know that that's happening across the board in Canada. And this continues to happen since the Liberals have been in power for the past 4 years. If re-elected, what are you going to do to change that?
We have made significant progress over the past 4 years on tangible things like lifting boil water advisories. We've lifted 87 long-term boil water advisories in Indigenous communities, but there's still more than 50 to go, although we feel we are on track to lifting all those that remain by the 5-year mark in the spring of 2021 that we had committed to. We are investing in new schools. We're investing in new health centers. We are investing in better partnerships, in support for First Nations and Indigenous post-secondary education. We're working directly with the Métis Nation on economic development and investments. We're moving forward on an urban and Indigenous strategy as well to recognize all those Indigenous peoples who face real challenges in our urban environments. There is so much more to do. We have taken meaningful steps forward that have made a significant difference in the lives of many Indigenous people. But we're the first to recognize there is still a long way to go. What took generations and indeed centuries to break, it's going to take time to fix. And I am impatient, but I also know the only way to move forward properly is in full partnership with Indigenous peoples, is empowering Indigenous communities themselves to determine the right path forward for them. And that sometimes takes a little bit longer because in many cases these communities have never been asked what it is that they want before. So we will work with them and be there to respect them, to empower them, and to build the future that they choose, not the future that we think from Ottawa would be the right future for them. That takes a little longer, I will admit, and every day longer we take, means more kids struggling for longer. But we have to get this right, and we have to do it in the full spirit of respect and partnership, and that is what our government has been focused on and will continue to be focused on.
David Aiken from Global News. Good morning. Good afternoon, Prime Minister. I know there'll be a lot of people here today of all races who will be very happy to hear you denounce racism in all its form and your earlier behavior. But the Prime Minister's job was not created so you could work through your issues. Maybe it's time that you realize you're not the indispensable man. As the leader of the Liberal Party, as the Prime Minister, you have very many capable leaders in your party, that perhaps you should step aside for some reflection, for some more understanding and discussion. Have you considered asking someone else to lead the party in this election?
I spent the morning speaking with candidates, with fellow Liberals, with allies, with leaders within racialized communities across the country, and I will continue to do the work that is necessary to keep us moving forward in the right way. Canadians have an important choice to make. Canadians have an important choice to make on October 21st. And I trust Canadians to make that right choice. I certainly hope that they will continue to support us in the work that we're doing, but they might not. And I know that that is something that all Canadians get to decide. And they get to bring in all sorts of different factors, because every Canadian has a different way of looking at what matters to them. And all I hope for is that Canadians take very seriously this responsibility and this choice that we will make as a country on October 21st. And until then, I will continue to put forward the very best team, the very best approach that I can to talk about how we're going to build a better future for Canadians.
I'd like to just follow up on the tone now of the campaign. It had a different tone until yesterday, and that tone was largely involved with your party finding lots of very questionable behaviors from many of your opponents, one of them right here in Winnipeg and Winnipeg North. Can you tell us how the tone is going to change as we start talking about things? Is it going to be so important to be digging up people's social media posts of the last 2, 3, 4 years? Are you going to be focused on that, or your party, pardon me, going to be focused on that?
Over the past 3 days, we have put forward significant policy announcements on how we will continue to do the work that we laid out over the past 4 years, work that resulted in creating over 1 million jobs and lifting 900,000 people out of poverty. We talked about raising the Canada Child Benefit for kids under 1 to make sure that more parents have the ability to give all the opportunities to their kids. We talked about doubling our investments in childcare so that there is better help for after school and before school care for parents who need it. And we've talked about supporting our seniors by increasing the old age security by 10% for seniors once they reach 75, because we recognize that costs continue to go up. We're going to continue to make contrasts with our opponents. We're going to continue to put forward strong pieces of policy that will demonstrate how we believe that investing in Canadians is the right path forward. But we will always and continue to do that in a way that pushes back against intolerance and racism every step of the way.
Last question.
Mr. Trudeau, the next time you're in a mosque or temple, how can you look at those people and tell them that you fully understand what they're going through?
That is a question I've had to answer from the very first time I had the opportunity to walk into a gurdwara or a mandir or a mosque in my riding and across the country. When people see someone who came from a place of privilege asking for the opportunity to represent them in the House of Commons, asking them for the opportunity to be their voice, even though obviously I'm someone who has had tremendous opportunities and advantages in my life. And that conversation I had that started over 10 years ago when I started my journey to being a politician is a conversation I need to continue to have every single day whenever I meet a voter, whenever I meet a Canadian, whenever I meet someone who is looking to me to serve them, to defend them, to represent them, and to build a better future with them. And I look forward to continuing these conversations that I get to have with Canadians from coast to coast to coast every single day as I travel across this country.
Just a follow-up.
En français? Ah, excusez. La question de comment je pourrais bien représenter quelqu'un de si différent de moi a été une question que j'ai dû répondre, à laquelle j'ai dû répondre depuis mes débuts en politique. Je suis quelqu'un qui est venu de beaucoup de privilèges et de vouloir représenter une communauté aussi diverse que Papineau, où il y a des défis économiques énormes. J'ai dû démontrer que je suis là pour mettre ma voix et mes capacités et les opportunités que j'ai eues au service de gens qui n'ont pas eu ces opportunités. Et je crois qu'au cours des 4 dernières années au gouvernement, mais des 10-12 dernières années en tant que politicien, j'ai démontré que le travail que je fais pour bien représenter les gens de toute diversité, il y a toujours mieux à faire, et est au cœur de ce que je fais et de ce que je continuerai à faire.
And just to follow up, you've apologized, but what policies and procedures would you enact that are anti-racism? Because as you can tell, there's people who have been affected by this.
Indeed. We were the first Canadian government to recognize the UN decade of people of African descent. We were the first government to specifically put forward $25 million over the coming years for the Black community to support grassroots community organizations to create opportunities for Black youth. We put forward a national anti-racism strategy that talks about anti-Black racism, that talks about anti-Semitism, talks about Islamophobia. We have moved forward in a significant way in partnership with a broad range of Canadians of all sorts of diversities and their groups. But we recognize, as you point out, there is always much more to do, and we will keep doing it. The choices we make on building a better future for all Canadians continues to be something that we are very much focused on as a country, as a government, and as a party. And we will continue to focus on that. Merci beaucoup tout le monde.
Prime Minister, one
Thank you
more
very
word.
much.
I just looked at her, I was like,